This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. I want to tell you, first of all, there's so much in the news, and we are going to get to all of it throughout the next 3 hours. But I want to tell you some stories about health care in the United States and in other places. And let's start with the United States. Thank you, Arthur. This latest story from Gallup. Gallup just did a poll, and they discovered that the first year of the Trump administration, uninsured Americans without access to health care other than a hospital emergency room, had been going down steadily. I mean, it had radically dropped as a result of the passage of the the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, and also known as Obamacare. And when the Republicans started taking it apart, and Trump has been systematically taking it apart, and the Republican tax scam that was passed a month or so ago, added another piece to taking it apart, that being the individual mandate, got rid of that. The number of uninsured Americans actually went up by over 3 million people during the first almost year of the Trump administration. And they note the number of uninsured, this is Max Greenwood in The Hill, the number of uninsured Americans in 2017 saw its largest single-year increase since the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. According to Gallup's Share Care Wellbeing Index, number of Americans without health insurance rose by 3.2 million people. Prior to that, it had fallen to a record low in the final quarter of 2016, the last quarter of President Obama's presidency. So there's this amazing story by Jen Tsakonas over in The Guardian today. She's telling the story of what happened 7 years ago or 11 years ago or something like that. It was some years ago, 11 years ago, when there was no Affordable Care Act in the United States. And health insurance companies could play all the kinds of games that Donald Trump and the Republicans, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, virtual certainty, your elected Republicans want to bring this back, right? So she had twins. She got pregnant, she had twins, and very often when you have twins, you have premature births. She had a premature birth, and the kids ended up in the neonatal ICU, the NICU, the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, which is expensive. And she writes, "It had never occurred to me the final repercussions someone could encounter because of an ongoing medical situation. We were a middle-class family with college degrees and solid full-time jobs in marketing and construction management. We owned our own house. We had very little debt. We had a savings account, retirement accounts, and comprehensive medical insurance. We traveled once or twice a year to exotic locations," and she goes on and on. "We thought we were prepared for anything, but never could have imagined this situation. In addition to the extreme guilt and anxiety I suffered during our months in the hospital, we also had the incredible shame that comes with not being able to pay your bills. Many of the procedures my kids needed were not covered by our so-called comprehensive medical plan. Our neonatal intensive care room was billed at $10,000 per day per child." They had 2 kids, $20,000 a day. And that was just for the room. "Doctors, nurses, specialists, tests, and drugs were additional. Our insurance covered 1 x-ray a day, and most days required multiple ones, which they would bill to us directly. One of our vaccines needed for 3 years wasn't covered at all, and it was $3,600 a month. By the time the boys hit 18 months old, we had exceeded the cap on our $2 million insurance policy and incurred $450,000 of medical debt. We liquidated our retirement accounts, our savings accounts, sold everything we owned to try and pay it off. When I realized our savings weren't enough, we listed an estate sale and opened our doors to crowds of Craigslist shoppers, telling them everything is for sale, and let people wander our house and offer us dollars for our furniture and collectibles we had worked so hard to acquire. I remember someone offering us $300 for our master bed, and I accepted. At this point, who needed a bed to sleep on?" And then she talks about how Obamacare would have made none of that happen. She says, "We lost our home, our cars, our possessions, and most importantly, our dignity." That was pre-Obamacare, okay? Now, I'd just like to contrast that with a dear friend of mine, one of my best friends who lives in the UK. And this friend of mine got sick a few days ago, as we all do, right? Not feeling well. and sent me this note saying, I don't feel well enough to go into town to be seen even by taxi. She called the doctor's office, right? And they don't want to come to me. Now, when I got that note, that email, I was like, well, gee, I'm sorry to hear you're not feeling well, but wait a minute, your doctor comes to you? And yeah, apparently. Then the next day, that was a couple of days ago, then the next day, she says, I got through to the home visit arranger today, and she said she'd probably get somebody out at lunchtime. Then I got a call from the doctor. He was determined not to come out. And then a few hours later, my doctor just came out and gave me an examination. We had a nice long chat. She still thinks it's just a stomach bug. And so this is the UK, right? Your doctor comes to you, and you don't pay anything for it. It's paid for by everybody in the UK. People take care of each other there. Here in the United States, you've got to sell your home, your car, your couch, your bed, just to take... this is nuts. And in the context of this, now look at what Matt Bevins is doing in Kentucky. And look at where Republicans in a whole bunch of other states want to do. Republicans in Arizona, Arkansas, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Utah, and Wisconsin are all trying to add work requirements to Medicaid. Keep in mind, the vast majority of people on Medicaid are elderly people in nursing homes and children, and people who are disabled. And the Republicans are adding work requirements, and not just that. Andy Slavitt tweeting about this. He says, Kentucky, of course, this was a few days ago, became the first state to require Medicaid beneficiaries to work or lose access. They're also requiring very poor people to pay premiums or lose coverage for extended periods. Here's how it works. Number one, there's a literacy provision. This is, from Stephen Miller's summary of this. State-approved health literacy or financial literacy course. Beneficiaries who are in an eligibility suspension for failure to meet their requirement. In other words, if you don't take this course on health literacy or financial literacy, tell your boss, sorry, I can't come to work at McDonald's today. I've got to go to this course, right? And you lose your job or whatever. If you don't take the course, your health insurance, your Medicaid gets canceled, and you can't even reapply for 6 months. There's a 6-month lockout. If you lose it for any reason, if you forget to fill out your paperwork, if the paperwork comes in a day late, if you pay your premium, even though it's very low, if you pay your premium a day late, bang, you're out for 6 months. And if you have and it goes on, consequences for beneficiaries who do not pay premiums, 6 months non-eligibility, disenrollment, 6-month non-eligibility for certain populations, limiting managed care organizations, etc. And then they say also, if you have a problem, call our Medicaid offices. Well, they have cut their Medicaid offices to the point that, you can be sitting on hold for hours while you're trying to get to work. Right? This is Matt Bevin, the brand new Republican governor of Kentucky, right? Remember when Kentucky was leading the nation? What was it? KenCare? Kentucky Care, whatever. There was a funny name for it. It was a cute name for it. He is smashing it. And the state now expects 95,000 Kentuckians to lose their health coverage as a result of what this Republican governor is doing. NPR gave him a real nice little fluff interview on Saturday. It was nuts. And plus, the state of Kentucky is going to give up $820 million of Medicaid expansion. It's not even costing the state to have Medicaid. In fact, it's actually costing the state to damage Medicaid this way by adding this so-called work requirement. And now you've got these other, 14 Republican-controlled states that are trying to do the exact same thing. We'll get back on this. Hang on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And that's just the beginning. Plus, Kevin McCarthy has figured out how to wrap Trump around his finger. I got to tell you about this. It's amazing. And welcome back. Andrew in Phoenix, Arizona, watching Free Speech TV on your Roku box. Hey, Andrew, what's up?
Oh, hey, Tom. I'd be talking with you today. Yesterday, you had two black callers, I believe their names were James, that were against the DACA program. And that deeply upsetted me as a black male myself. The earlier caller who you had on, I believe he was a black millennial in terms of how he sounded, was frustrated with there not being as many black millionaires or blacks really being mentioned in Forbes in terms of like when you talk about the stock market or technology. And he's right about that, but I think some of his issues in terms of like how he felt that they, you know, African and Arab and Haitian and Hispanic immigrants were getting affirmative action and that we were not. I think he's probably not looking at the issue that the black community, specifically in the black American community, there's been a lot of problems, specifically considered with institutional racism, that probably have kept many people down, where they're not going to colleges and getting, you know, these affirmative action or black scholarships that are there for them. Not people, you know, who are in DACA or who are African immigrants. It's really problems that are in our own community. And to be honest, in my opinion, you know, I don't think really that's something that government can solve. You know, there was a quote I remember Malcolm X saying, you know, we have to be the ones to take care of our community and build our community up. You know, because we can't, I'm going to be honest, I don't think we can really rely on government to fix those particular issues.
Yeah. I think, though, that he was referencing a storyline that has been fed to a number of different racial groups over the years by basically the overclass, right? By the very, very wealthy who want to maintain the power structure as it is. When I was a kid, Andrew, and quote, forced busing was happening. When I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, I went to an all-white school, and when I was in 6th grade, I think, they started busing kids into my school from inner city schools and vice versa, right? And the story that white people were told back then by people like, you know, William F. Buckley and other conservatives was, those black people are coming for your jobs, right? And so that was 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Then 15, 20 years ago, as African Americans got more integrated into the workplace and schools and things like that, as a result of some changes in our structure, I guarantee, you know, I agree with you, it has not been fixed. Then it became the message. Then they started directing this message, the exact same message, to black people about brown people, about Hispanics, saying they're coming for your jobs, and it's a scam.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I agree with you 100% on that song. Specifically, I believe your last caller yesterday, the older black male, I believe, was basically saying that they're, you know, Hispanics and Haitians and Africans are stealing jobs from us, and that's just not true.
Yeah.
Most of them are really probably getting jobs that, for the most part, we don't want to do ourselves, or most Americans want to do. You know, here in Arizona, you know, you have people working at 115 degrees on farms or land.
Right. Andrew, the music has started. We're gonna hit a break here, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And frankly, I think we should raise the wages for those jobs. But Andrew, thank you so much for the call. Very well said. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So this is, you know, I've laid out these bizarre, amazing contrasts between a country, you know, the UK, which is you know, normal for the world, right? Most of the developed countries have something closer to a single payer system rather than a semi-socialized medicine system. You know, the government in most countries doesn't own the hospitals, but they're run by nonprofits and things like that. But the point is, we're literally the only country in the developed world that does not consider health care a right rather than a privilege. And we moved a big step forward with Obamacare. And the Republicans are absolutely committed to destroying that and taking us back to the time when the average American working person can be absolutely devastated. Here's a couple, both of them were working, they had college degrees, they had good incomes, they owned a home, they owned cars, wiped out, declared bankruptcy, lost everything, simply because they had twins. That would not happen in any other developed country in the world. It just would not happen. I remember I was in Denmark. We did this show from Denmark about 6-8 years ago. Danish radio let us use their studios for a week. And I had on one of the conservative members of the Danish parliament. And I was saying, oh, you're a conservative. You must want to privatize healthcare. And he was like, what, are you crazy? And I said, well, you know, in America, half of all bankruptcies are because somebody got sick. What's the percentage in Denmark? And he was like, no, you're just making that up, right? And I said, no, I'm not. What's the percentage in Denmark? And he said, I don't believe you. And I said, no, it's true. What's the percentage in Denmark? And he said, nobody in Denmark goes bankrupt because they get sick. 0. So now we have this headline from Common Dreams. Trump launches savage attack on Medicaid by pushing work requirements. Seema Verma, who is the head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in the Trump administration, euphemistically describes the new guidance as an effort to, quote, transform Medicaid. Yeah, the Trumpies, they want to transform Medicaid. Well, it's not just Trump. I mean, in fact, I doubt Trump even knows about this. He's so ignorant of policy. This is Paul Ryan, this and all the Tea Party guys and the right-wing billionaires who fund them and Mitch McConnell and his right-wing buddies in the Senate. Analysts argue that the policy shift is little more than a sneak attack on an extremely popular program that provides crucial medical coverage to over 70 million Americans. Who would lose their health coverage as a result of these new guidelines? People who can't find work, people who live in areas of persistent unemployment. So you got to get a job to get your it's not Obamacare, to get your Medicaid. Got laid off during a recession, have seasonal jobs, don't get as many hours from their employer as they need. And now Maine, Arkansas, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, and several other states are asking, hey, can we do the same thing that Matt Bevins is doing in Kentucky and just totally screw our working poor? I mean, for people who are capable of work, most of them are, the vast majority of who are on Medicaid, the vast majority of them are working. They're just working at a job that pays so little that they qualify for Medicaid. It's our way of subsidizing Walmart and Walmart-type employers. It's amazing. Elizabeth Bruning in the Washington Post says, if Republicans truly cared about punishing lazy individuals soaking up money without having to work for it, they should be focusing their attention on the idle rich. People, I call them morbidly rich. She says they soak up plenty of unearned money from the economy in the forms of rent, dividends, and capital income, and yet rarely do politicians complain about the laziness of the very, very, very well off. Echoing Bruning in a tweet on Wednesday, Roosevelt Institute fellow Michael Linden concluded there's perhaps no better example of the moral rot at the core of the Republican Party than imposing so-called work requirements on sick Medicaid recipients just weeks after passing a massive tax cut for rich heirs who literally did no work at all to inherit their wealth. You get this? The Republicans are saying, hey, if your daddy was a billionaire, you're golden. We're going to help you out. We're going to give you more welfare. We're going to give you more government benefits. We're going to reduce your taxes. We're going to make you happy. But if your daddy wasn't a billionaire or even a multimillionaire like Donald Trump's, tough luck. Joan McCarter, writing over at Daily Kos, Republicans admit that Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, which they have not re-upped the funding yet for, is a budget hostage. CHIP is this is a quote from an Axios piece. CHIP is leverage, although there's not much disagreement over what to do about the program itself. So even Republicans want it. It's popular in their states. Meanwhile, Daniel Campoamar wrote a brilliant piece over at Newsweek titled "Trump's America is an S-hole country." And she notes over 23,000 infants died in the United States in 2015, the last year that we have statistics for. The U.S. has the worst rate of maternal deaths in the developed world. And by the way, in a subset of that data, black women are 3 times more likely than white women to die during childbirth. An American woman, broadly, any race, an American woman giving birth is 3 times more likely to die than a Canadian woman, and 6 times more likely to die than a Scandinavian woman. And 60% of all maternal deaths were completely preventable. But people don't get the health care they need because we have such a screwed up system here, this for-profit healthcare system. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And yes, I am going to tell you how this neat little trick that Kevin McCarthy's figured out to manipulate Donald Trump. Stick around. Welcome back. I don't know if you noticed if you were watching any of the TV reports of Trump yesterday and the day before, but he had this little poodle following him around, Kevin McCarthy, the number 2 Republican in the U.S. House of Representatives, and behind Paul Ryan. And Kevin McCarthy appears to have figured out something that his colleagues didn't know. Kevin McCarthy, of course, a right-wing crank, a creature of the cocktopus, part of the, one of the, I don't know if he calls himself a Tea Party or, actually, I think the Tea Party's kind of lost its cachet. None of them call themselves Tea Parties anymore, but probably, a cokehead or one of those. But he was on Air Force One with Trump, and Trump offered him some candies. And the candies are the Starbursts. And they're individually wrapped. Trump is constantly afraid somebody's going to spit in his food, or just contaminate it with cooties by touching it, which is why he eats McDonald's, because it's sanitary made and nobody knows that it's going to Donald Trump, so they're not going to spit in the burger or something. And so anyhow, Trump gave him a handful of Starburst candies. Now, Starburst candies come in all kinds of colors, but the ones Trump gave him were all pink or red. That's it. And McCarthy very quickly figured out that those were Trump's favorite candies. And so he ordered one of his staffers to take a big box of Starburst candies, or a big bag of them, and pick out all pink and red ones, put them in a box, says to President Trump from Kevin McCarthy, big letters, my name on it, and presents them to Donald Trump. And Trump smiled broadly. He loved it. The article in The Hill, McCarthy gave Trump a jar of his favorite Starburst flavors. And thus, Donald Trump now, Kevin McCarthy has become his best friend. He is the new Trump whisperer on the Republican side. This is pathetic. The Saudis figured out that if you butter up Trump, you could literally change U.S. foreign policy. They did, and he did. The Israelis, Netanyahu figured this out. The Chinese figured this. Everybody's got his number. The guy he's got the emotional intelligence that, Michael Wolff says 3-year-old in his book. I'd say 7-year-old. A narcissistic 7-year-old. And this is who is leading our country. This is damn scary stuff. Gina, am I saying that right? Gina in Hollywood, Maryland?
Yes, you are.
Hey, Gina, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Hi. Good afternoon. Thank you. I have to say I originally called in because I had a comment from the original a letter that you had read from a viewer who encountered twins.
Yeah, actually it was an article in The Guardian today. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just called in because I also had a situation where my son was born premature. He was flown to Georgetown University. The cost of a month and a half plus the delivery, the whole thing was over $500,000. Was covered in full by Obamacare.
Right. And that was their point, was this happened 11 years ago, and they ended up with a $450,000 medical bill after their insurance had paid $2 million, and it wiped that $500,000 medical bill totally wiped them out. I mean, wiped out everything.
And I was fortunate. I was covered. I was actually covered under 100% under the Obamacare because of the situation financially that I was in with my husband at the time.
Right. Right. And
I had previously, the year before, was covered under Blue Cross Blue Shield, where I had a daughter, and that was covered natural birth. Everything was fine. And then he suffered a job loss. Thankfully, I had Obamacare, and I had my son.
Yeah, remarkable. And the Republicans want to take this away. And in fact, Donald Trump is.
Yep.
Donald Trump is.
I also wanted to say I saw McCarthy during the Thursday DACA bipartisan meeting, and I kind of saw he had figured him out then.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Jenna, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for sharing your story with us. It's a great illustration. I appreciate it. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
I just want to shout out to, I don't know if you heard about this, but Fort Collins has
Colorado
getting their own internet. And
I thought that was Longmont. Or is it the same thing?
Might be several, but I
Yeah.
know Fort Collins, Colorado.
Uh-huh.
I just read it. I believe it's alternate. Has got figured out they're going to, for $150 million, and it's $150,000, about 150,000 population. They're going to have their own broadband, so they could say, put a middle finger to Comcast and all the like. And it only took about 15,000 in PR to get this done.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I mean, so it's about $10. So I think this is, and a lot of these rural areas are getting broadband better than the, other areas because they're fighting for it themselves.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think, people are realizing that city-owned, municipal-owned, in other words, citizen-owned water systems, electric systems, septic systems, roads, always work better than privatized ones where some corporation is trying to make a buck off it. And that's all infrastructure stuff. And we're now realizing, I think, particularly, maybe Ajit Pai did us a favor, the former Verizon lobbyist or lawyer or whatever he was, who now runs the FCC. Maybe he did us a favor by shoving in our face how the corporations are going to try and, basically rob us of a wide open internet. And cities all over the country are going, whoa, really? We're gonna do something about that. Jeff, it's a great one. Thanks for calling and sharing that. From Jeff to Jeff. Jeff in Salt Lake City, Utah. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm a disabled person in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I am just really worried to death about these work requirements when it comes to Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
I also help a lot of my disabled friends navigate the system here, and it's already so onerous and Kafkaesque and just really so difficult to navigate the system that if you put work requirements on top of everything else, it's going to make it almost impossible for people.
Yeah. Well, they're doing the same thing with Social Security right now. The budget that the Republicans want to vote on in 3 days has an almost $500 million cut, if my recollection is correct. I'll track it down, but I'm quite sure that's the amount, to Social Security Administration, so that when you try to get your Social Security, or if you have problems with it, or if you want something fixed, you're going to have to sit in line for hours and hours and hours. Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's massive. I mean, the Republic, they're not cutting Social Security benefits, but they're cutting the employees. You're going to be laying people off, and as a result of that, you're absolutely right. Very well said, Jeff. Thank you. Charles in Opelika, Florida. Hey, Charles.
Hey, how you doing today, Tom?
Good. You on our top?
I was calling about Donald Trump.
Okay.
And we can't believe this corporate media when they say, or when they try to glaze it over for what Donald Trump said. We know the words that he said it because he said it from the campaign trail in so many words.
Yeah.
And I just think if I hear that another person from my community, the black community, saying that he needs to apologize, no, he doesn't. Because sometimes you have to let people talk and let them be themselves. And we got to get over this. To be honest with you, I just feel like, in a way, we're so complacent because we just think everything is going to go, the way that I guess the way that we think that it should, as far as treating each other fairly.
Yeah.
Being equitable to each other. And that's not the way that this Republican Party is working. They have been at war with, and they say it. If you listen to right-wing radio, they are at war with the Democrats, which are us,
right?
Regular people. And in war, there is no apologies. So we need to buck up, and we need to realize, off our first impression, we were right, and we can't get glazed over by this corporate media that's steady lying to us and saying, well, this is this administration's first time. These people don't know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They've been campaigning on this.
They have been trying to
raving on right-wing television, right-wing radio.
Yeah,
what they wanted to do, they're doing it now. And if Trump was really, if he really cared about these darker people, if he really thinks that they live in.
Oh, no. I'm sorry, Charles. We cannot use that word on the air. And okay, we bleeped it out. But my apologies if anybody even inferred. We even though the president uses that word, we cannot use that word on the air. But Charles's point, and I think it was Marian Wright Edelman, the founder of the Children's Defense Fund, I could be wrong, who said, when somebody tells you who they are, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And Donald Trump repeatedly, throughout the Republican primaries, throughout the election, showed us and told us who he was. That he was a bigot, that he was a xenophobe, that he was largely ignorant, that he was uninformed, that he was not curious, that he thought in bumper stickers, that he has no depth, that he has a deep streak of anger and paranoia and frankly, rage, that he's incapable of having, meaningful interactions with, frankly, anybody. I mean, you're his friend and then you're his enemy and then you're his friend and then you're his enemy, and he doesn't care as long as he's the center of attention, as long as he's the one getting the publicity, as long as he's the one getting the press. And in the midst of this, you've got a bunch of Republicans around him like Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and frankly, all these other guys, Cory Gardner, I mean, you name them, who want to destroy Medicare and Medicaid because, hey, it's a socialist program, right? They've been trying to destroy it ever since 65 when LBJ put it into law. They've been trying to destroy Social Security ever since 1933, 34, 35, whatever year, I think it was 35, that the Social Security was put into place by Franklin Roosevelt. And they are doing it. They are, and they've been obviously just trying to destroy Obamacare ever since President Obama put it into law. And they are doing it. They are actually doing it. And we need to take this seriously. This is a declaration of war by the morbidly rich against the rest of America. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls, the news of the day, and my thoughts on all of the above right after this. Wouldn't it be great to have all the energy you want all day long?
It's free speech.
Free speech. I'm sorry. Yeah. It would be, wouldn't it? You don't want to hear a commercial, though. Benny, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network. Hey, Benny, what's on your mind today?
Oh, good morning, Tom. You just mentioned that the morbidly rich.
Yeah.
And
my favorite hashtag.
No matter whether we want clean water or we want jobs or better education, unless we get this dark money, especially, out of our politics, we can't win.
Yeah.
And that has to be, you probably remember the KISS, Keep It Simple, Stupid, and then Clinton had It's the Economy, Stupid.
Right.
Well, right now it's the money and politics.
Yeah, that is the cancer at the core of everything. I agree with you, Benny.
Yes, and so it seems to me that we have to get, especially this year, congressional candidates and grassroots and support those that aren't taking money.
Yeah.
And this isn't going to be, Koch Network has been at this for almost 40 years now. It is not going to be reversed in one election.
Yeah.
And, I was a union leader for years with the American Postal Workers Union.
Mm-hmm.
And our longtime president, Noel Bellier, ended each speech and each article with, the struggle continues.
Right. And
So
it
no matter
does.
whether you have a Bill of Rights or a brand new union contract, the struggle continues.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd like to see you have similar to your bunch with Bernie, but like Revolution Thursday or something, and people and grassroots something, and people call in or have guests and how things can be done.
Right. Yep.
And then successful personal stories about success at the grassroots level.
Well, and whenever anybody calls in who is doing that kind of stuff or has become a precinct committee person or whatever, we absolutely want to put them at the top of the list. But there is a solution to the money in politics. The money in politics crisis in the United States was created by the United States Supreme Court. In 1976, they ruled that the First Amendment, that the founders, when they wrote the First Amendment, they intended for billionaires to own their very own private politicians. And then in 2010, they expanded that to corporations and amplified it. And then in 2013, that's Citizens United, and then in 2013 in the McCutcheon decision, they said that an individual billionaire or an individual corporation is not limited to only 200 or some odd, I think it was 212 politicians or something. There was a number. You couldn't donate, you couldn't own more than this number of politicians. In McCutcheon, they said, no, you can own as many politicians as you want. And that needs to be overturned. And there's a great group, there's a bunch of great groups working on this. One of the very best is movetoamend.org. And they are, and they're part of a coalition of other groups to pass a constitutional amendment to overturn the Supreme Court's ruling. And the constitutional amendment would say corporations are not people and money is not First Amendment protected free speech. Benny, well said. Thanks a lot for the call. And thank you for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. My calls are not, I think, in the right order. Here we go. Michael in Aurora, Illinois. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Oh, Tom?
Yeah. You wanted to talk about the Medicaid work requirement, our topic for the hour?
Yes. Regarding the president's requirement to work for, if you're on Medicaid, I'm in a situation currently. I am on Medicaid and Medicare. I am also disabled due to some mental health and physical ailments, and I am receiving a disability, which of course is Social Security.
Right.
My situation is if I cannot work or I lose all of my Social Security. If I lose my Social Security, then I'm going to lose my Medicaid and Medicare benefits as well. So I don't understand. I don't think the president really knows that that's pretty much the way it works in this country. And believe me, I would love to be able to work. I do have some things that I'm working on to hopefully get myself off of disability. As you know, you just can't go work at McDonald's and everything will be hunky-dory.
Right.
And so, and of course, it's a situation where, either way, I'm screwed. I can't, if the president wants to make me work, I'm going to lose everything. So it doesn't really seem to make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It's punitive. What they're trying to do is ruin these programs. This is an old Republican strategy. Break government, then stand there going, oh, look, it's broken. We should take those functions and hand them over to some billionaires on Wall Street. And use that as the excuse to destroy it. And your example is a brilliant one, Michael. Yes, these programs, maybe we should try a minimum guaranteed income or something like that, and Medicare for all. If we had those two things, you wouldn't have to be doing this dance with 3 different agencies. But this is the situation we've got, and it's a result of compromise between Republicans and Democrats, and it's really a tragedy. Michael, I have to move along, but thank you for sharing your story with us and for your call. Susan in Brunswick, Georgia. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how are you today?
Great. What's up?
I just wanted to throw this out there and see if there are a lot of people in my position as well. My job doesn't give us any insurance, which, that's the way it is. But I hear a lot of people that are on the Affordable Care Act, and I am all for that. But I think that there's a lot of people like me where they don't get it from their jobs. They don't make enough money where they can afford insurance on your own, and then you're not poor enough where you can get the subsidies that the Affordable Care Act gives you. I'm 61 years old. My insurance, if I get it on the individual market, I was looking at for anywhere between $700 and $800 a month. It's probably more now because I'm 61, and yet because of my income, I don't qualify for any of the subsidies from the Affordable Care Act.
You're stuck in that middle spot.
I'm just wondering, I'm putting it out there, are there a lot of people like me that do not have health insurance because you're right in the middle there, and we're just waiting to be on
Medicare?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, Susan. I don't know what the statistics are off the top of my head, but I know that this is a fairly common problem. And you know, Obamacare was nothing perfect. I mean, you know, it was an attempt to fix a badly broken system, and even for you not having insurance, you know, the Affordable Care Act has offered you some guarantees and protections. But it is a system that needs to be reformed, and the easiest, most functional, and frankly least expensive for us as a nation reform that would produce the best health care would be to go to a single-payer system or some variation on that. Susan, I got to move along. Thank you for the call. Jimmy in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. Hey, Jimmy, what's up?
Oh, hello, Tom. How are you? I have a comment I want to make about Medicare, what they're trying to do with Medicare with a work requirement. Mm-hmm. Think about it. The people who work, the social workers who I guess would have to oversee that, they won't be happy because they're having to, that's extra work for them, and they're going to have to check up on all this, you know, the people working or whatever, and I'm sure a lot of them are going to, you know, have numbers that don't really add up, so it's just not going to be a good thing.
Yeah, plus they're going to be having to tell people, sorry, you don't get any health care this year, or, you know, you're locked out for 6 months while you're in the middle of your chemotherapy or whatever it may be, you know, because you didn't fill out the form on time.
And, you know, people that have Medicaid, I mean, that Medicaid is not insurance. If you're going to put a work requirement on it, that's health insurance. That's what health insurance is. You work and you get health insurance.
Yeah, it's not welfare, it's insurance.
Medicaid is for people who don't.
Yeah, it's not welfare, it's insurance. And Medicaid is health insurance. It's health insurance for people who don't have enough money to buy health insurance in the stupid marketplace that we have right now. Jimmy, well said. Thank you very much for the call. Boy, what a big topic. We got a lot of other things to talk about today as well. Professor Steve Keen is going to be with us right after the break. We're going to be talking about the state of the economy and how can you have an economic recovery when the economy is not actually getting any better for the average person. Stick around. It's going to be fascinating.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Professor Steve King. He's the head of the School of Economics, Politics, and History at Kingston University in London, the United Kingdom. His website's debtdeflation.com/blogs and ideaeconomics.org. You can tweet him at Prof. Steve, S-T-E-V-E, Keen, K-E-E-N. And Steve, welcome. It seems like it's been about a year since we talked. It's been way too long. Welcome back to the program.
It's nice to be here, Tom. Actually, these days I'm mainly on Patreon too, by the way. I've moved over to a Patreon site, patreon.com/Prof. Steve Keen. That's where people can find most of my work.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And so, you know, we have what appears to be an economic recovery. The Dow's hitting all-time highs right now. And the president's bragging about how wonderful the economy is, and unemployment seems to be low. Although I understand that there have been changes in the way that the unemployment numbers that are used for that context have been figured. Like we no longer count people who are, quote, discouraged workers. They really want a job, but they live someplace where there are no jobs and they've given up. What is the actual state of our economy, and how can we have an economic recovery when the economy is not actually getting better for the average person?
Well, if you look at the level of employment in America, there's actually separate statistics recorded for the employment rate and the unemployment rate. And if the two were both validly calculated, then of course one would be the mirror image of the other. That is the case relatively in the UK, but when you look at the United States, absolutely not. The employment numbers actually peaked in 2000. They then fell substantially with the recession, with the dot-com bubble bursting back then, rose once more to peak but at a lower level in 2007, and then plunged during the Great Recession, and they have still not recovered to the level that they were prior to the 2007 bubble bursting. So on the employment data, in fact, employment is substantially worse than it was in 2000. And even if you take into account demographic change, there are about 3 million Americans who had jobs in 2000 who don't have jobs today. And maybe now, I think it's down about between 2 and 2.5 million people now. But it's still a substantial fraction of the workforce that do not have jobs. Whereas at the same time, the unemployment rate is now down below what it was before the bubble burst back in 2007. So I don't think the economy is doing anywhere near as well as the unemployment data implies. And of course, we know the growth rate has been relatively anemic for the last decade.
So we're being scammed with these numbers?
The stock market than it has been in the real economy, though the real economy has recovered. And part of the recovery is because the whole crisis, as you know, I argue, was caused by a collapse in credit, and that led to a fall in private debt from the historically high level of 170% of GDP down to about 145%. It's now starting to rise once more, and as it's rising, that's fueling some additional demand. So the increase in demand is coming partly out of that credit basis, but mainly I think it's been inflated by QE, which of course has inflated asset prices by far more.
Which was my second question for you, is to what extent is what is being called the recovery anyway? It's certainly a recovery for the top 10, 20% of Americans who own stock. To what extent has that recovery in the stock market been caused by the central banks buying up toxic assets and buying up bonds, injecting money and injecting credit into the economy? And am I even saying that right, Steve?
Yeah, well, you think you're quite right, because when you look at what the central banks did, of course, they had absolutely no idea the crisis was coming. When it hit them, they went into panic mode. And in panic mode, they pumped an enormous amount of money into bank reserves, a gigantic increase under Bernanke's control of the Fed.
It was like 20 trillion, wasn't it?
QE. And in many ways, what they were doing was they did something unconventional using conventional channels, and that is the central banks always deal with with private banks, and all they could think of doing is rescuing the private banks. And what they did was they'd say, we're going to be on the buy side of bond transactions, which they have all the time with private banks, to the tune, in America's case, of $1 trillion US a year. Now, that is more than 5% of the economy. It's a substantial amount of money. But what it was doing is, when they would buy the bonds off the private banks would each year have $1 trillion more cash and $1 trillion less income-earning bonds than they had beforehand. That encouraged them to go and buy shares. Of course, they bought shares of people who own shares, who don't happen to be your average Walmart worker. That drove up the price of the shares, and the owners of those shares could sell them for a profit. And if you imagine what they were doing with them, they'd buy other assets, such as housing, but also different shares again, and maybe 10% of the money they got they might have spent buying the odd Lamborghini and getting one of those ex-Walmart employees to clean it for them. So consequently, maybe about 10% of that trillion actually turned up in the real economy. So it was a very inefficient way of powering the real economy, but a very powerful way of propelling up share prices and making the Wall Street economy feel much better.
So we have a situation now where some of these very large companies are announcing their share buybacks, and they're literally multi-billion-dollar share buybacks. How does that? I mean, I've explained this before to people that, if you've got 1 million shares at $100 each, and you buy back 500,000 shares, then each share now is not worth $100, it's worth $200. So buying your shares back, having a company basically retire their shares, increases the price of those shares. But, no actual value has been created. No new things have been sold. The company hasn't actually gotten wealthier. It just drives up the stock market because so many of the senior executives now are being compensated with stock. They're getting richer and richer. Is that an accurate analysis, and is that what's going on right now?
It is an accurate analysis, and in many ways it's a failure of comprehension by the central banks, because they didn't deliberately set out to make the rich even richer, but the mechanisms that they're used to using, which is dealing with other private banks, necessarily meant that those private banks were the ones who received the money that the Fed created,
out of nothing, double entry bookkeeping. You didn't pay any taxes for the $1 trillion a year they were spending buying bonds off the private banks. But what that meant was it made the wealthy even wealthier, when in fact that was one of the side effects of the rise, the asset price bubble back in before 2007. So we had a symptom of increasing inequality coming out of the private debt-levered bubble up to 2007, and the remedy of the central banks, who were clueless about what caused the crisis in the first place, actually accentuated that inequality even more.
Yeah. So I've got, for example, I have a press release here from Chuck Schumer's office, the head of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate, and after the Senate passed the bill, the tax cut, these companies announced these kinds of share buybacks. Home Depot is going to take $15 billion of their tax cut and buy their own shares back. Oracle, $12 billion. Honeywell, $6.5 billion. Pfizer, $10 billion. Bank of America, $5 billion. Anthem, $5 billion. Boeing, $4 billion. MasterCard, $4 billion. United Airlines, $3 billion. PPG, $2.5 billion. American Tower, $2 billion. T-Mobile, $1.5 billion. It goes on and on. You get the trend. This was something that, would have been not even possible back in the 80s. I mean, when they changed the rules on executive compensation, it used to be you couldn't compensate executives with stock like this, and you couldn't play games with stock like this. I'm not sure that companies could or couldn't buy back their shares. I don't know if that rule changed or not. Please let me know. But is that going to drive these shares up? And by the way, we've only got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's driven the shares up, and really it's made capitalism even more unequal than it would be without the intervention of the central bank. And that's the opposite of what they should be doing. So they really have damaged their own credibility out of this, while causing an anemic recovery for most of the economy and a fantastic one for the Wall Streets.
Wow. So the central banks are driving this process, and the big corporations are taking advantage of it, and all the rest of us get standing outside on the outside looking in. Professor Steve Keen, the School of Economics, Politics and History at Kingston University in London. Patreon.com/Prof. Steve Keen. You can tweet him at Prof. Steve Keen. And Steve, thanks so much for being with us.
Good to talk to you, Tom.
Always great talking with you, Steve. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Henry in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Hey, Henry, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Thank you for taking my call. I tried to make a medical appointment, and as a new patient, the receptionist asked me, what insurance do you have? I said, Medicare. Then she said, we don't take Medicare.
Right.
So I said, okay, then I'll pay cash. Then she says, we cannot do that because we have an agreement with Medicare not to accept cash.
Whoa.
Now, it overwhelmed me at the moment. Thinking back now, I should have told her that there is something in the gray area of becoming illegal.
Yeah, your dollar bill says, valid for all debts, public and private, as I recall, unless they've changed our currency since the last time I looked, which was probably 20 years ago. But and I think that we should, we need a law that says something like, Medicare, if you're in the medical business, you take Medicare.
Yep. And I suspect it might have been a sneaky way to steer new patients into becoming members of insurance companies.
Sure. Yeah.
And I went to the Social Security office here in town, and they told me the next time that happens, report it to us.
Yeah, but see, the problem is with the Republicans, cutting $500 million out of Social Security's budget. There's not going to be anybody to take your complaint.
Yeah. I have one piece of information for you. Medicare is going to issue new Medicare numbers because in the past, when you go to an office and you give your Medicare number, it's identical to your Social Security number.
Right, plus a letter.
Yeah, so you're spreading your private Social Security all over the place.
Right.
And Medicare has finally realized the risk that is involved, and so in May they come out with new Medicare numbers.
Yeah.
To protect you.
Thank you, Henry. Thanks for the call. Rhonda in Portland, Michigan. Hey, Rhonda, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hi, Tom. Hi. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. I doing a very bold and perhaps for some people dangerous thing. I have decided to refuse my Medicare.
Why?
And, well, I paid into it for over 30 years. I'm paying it again by having a deductible that just went up. I'm perfectly healthy. And I decided to take the deductible and place it into a special savings account. Because at this time, I do not advise anyone to follow my silly...
I would not either.
Because some people are chronically ill, and some people do need to have Medicare.
Well, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be illness, Rhoda. It's, I mean, you get hit by a car, or you fall down and break your hip or something. I mean, you know, these are unexpected events that can cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, but what are the odds? I'm pretty old, and I've never had a situation. I drive...
Well, the odds increase dramatically the older you get.
True.
Yeah.
But what has happened to me is that my trips, my rare occasions I go to the doctor, what I have to pay him is so far below the deductible that I end up paying anyway.
Yeah.
It's like I'm paying the deductible and I'm paying the $90 for...
I understand.
For what have you.
Rhoda, I've got to run, but thank you for the call. Good luck. I wish you well. I would not advise anyone else to do that, but I hope it works out for you. .21 past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Lance in Kitco Smovey Village, Arizona. I'm mangling it, Lance. My apologies.
No, sir. That's close enough. Kikosmovy. Yes, sir. Thank you, Tom. I really do appreciate what you're doing again. I always try to comment on that because it's important. You bring up a lot of good issues, and you're informing everybody, and we really do appreciate that. Tom, you were talking to Mr. Keene about the bailouts, and I just wanted to ask you something. I know you got other people waiting, so I'll just get off, but I wanted to ask you a quick question here. On when they grilled Bernanke, I think it was around 2009, they were asking him how, or 2010, I think it was, they were asking him how he was able to help bail him out. It was like 27 trillion or something like that, 20 trillion, what you guys were talking about. And he just said simply manipulating the numbers on the computer, because they have accounts with us.
That's correct.
Just like, people. So I'll get off, and if you can explain that, I really do appreciate it. But thanks, Tom, for what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Lance. Typically, the way that money is created, and I'm not the best guy to do this. This would be a good question for Steve Keene. But typically, the way that money is created in our money supply is by banks lending money out at interest. And when they lend money, they literally create most of it out of thin air. And the Fed has ways of injecting money into the money supply or money into the economy, and that is by taking static things that represent money but aren't liquid. Like, for example, a bank is sitting on $1 billion worth of mortgages, or actually during the crash, it was even things like CDOs, collateralized debt obligations, these so-called derivatives. So they're sitting on $1 billion worth of derivatives. That's not cash in the economy. That's an asset, theoretically. I mean, a lot of them were useless assets. So when the Fed buys that asset, so they go to Wells Fargo and they say, you got $1 billion worth of crappy loans. We'll buy those from you. Here's $1 billion. Wells Fargo now has $1 billion. And if they want a loan, say you come to them and you want to borrow $100,000 to buy a house, Wells Fargo only has to have $10,000 in the bank, as it were, to create another $90,000 out of thin air, literally, by loaning that money to you. So if they pass out $1 billion to a bank, that bank can turn that into $10 or $100 billion, whatever the ratio is now, and that's a number I'm not certain about, but there is a ratio between how much they have to have, what are called bank reserves, and how much they can loan. But the difference between the two is the amount of money that they literally created out of thin air. So what the Fed does is by buying these bonds, by buying these assets from the banks, and even treasuries, when they're buying treasuries, Congress passed a law back, I think it was in the 50s, saying that whenever the Fed buys treasuries, whenever they buy U.S. government debt, they have to buy it from a commercial bank. So the commercial bank gets a piece of that action. So as the Fed, so this is why, people say quantitative easing, and it's all about the Fed buying things. Well, why would the Fed buying things mean anything? Well, because the Fed gives that money to the banks, and then the banks loan that money out and massively expand the money supply. So I hope that makes sense. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Yeah, hey, not touch, Tom. And I agree with you completely about you named certain world leaders that have manipulated Donald Trump.
Yes.
But I just wanted to add that I think his advisors, the people around him, also display the attributes or characteristics of a personality cult. And I also think that is being manipulated. I think Assad, Syria, has already successfully done it. I believe they're probably going to do it again with this buildup of border soldiers, 30,000 of them, I guess, along the border of Turkey and Syria. And also, I just wanted to say that, Jeff Flake, even though I disagree with Jeff Flake on, politically on almost everything, I believe his speech referencing Stalin and Khrushchev is appropriate because Khrushchev did talk about the, Personin cult, or the cult of personality and its detriment.
And he was speaking of Stalin. And Jeff Flake's main point was the point that George Orwell made in 1984 in fiction, but that, and all historians do, that when Hitler came to power in 33, I think it was 33, the first thing he started doing was talking about the Lügenpresse. The Lügenpresse is, that literally is German for lying press, fake news. And, when Stalin came to power in the Soviet Union, he talked about the lying press. He called the press the enemy of the people. That literally was his phrase, enemy of the people. When Mao came to power in China, he defined the press as, quote, the enemy of the people, end quote. These are words that totalitarians use, the dictatorships use, and that Donald Trump uses. And that should cause all of us to swallow hard and think twice. Dave, thanks for the call. Mike in Chicago. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of file this under wishful thinking, but I wanted to expand on your comment about calling it the Pence administration.
Mike, let me put you back on hold. I'm very sorry. I missed my time cue there, and I'll pick you up on the other side of this break. It's 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
By the way, Louise and I went to see The Post yesterday. What an astonishing movie. I never thought I would cry in a movie about the Washington Post. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Mike in Chicago. Mike, I'm sorry. Welcome back. What's on your mind today?
Okay. Just another victim of comatus interruptus.
There you go. Comatus. I love it.
Yeah, as I was saying, I wanted to kind of put it under wishful thinking, not sure how it could be done, but the idea of your term, the Pence administration, if that could be put out there by enough people so that it reaches Trump's ears, diaper Don, I don't think he would handle that too well. I'm wondering and curious how he would possibly try to deal with that. Maybe they could get rid of Pence. I'm sure he would throw him under the bus for some reason.
Yeah. I don't know. And I because Pence has done such a great job of sucking up to Donald Trump. Have you seen the website, officialmikepence.com?
Yeah. But
it's a spoof piece, but it's brilliant. It's like, see you tomorrow, for today is now today, the 46th president of the United States, Mike Pence, and it's got a whole video and born in Columbus, Indiana, on June 7, 1959, a wholesome heterosexual couple, Edward and Nancy Pence. Michael Richard Pence was named after his grandfather Richard, who emigrated to America from the non-Muslim majority country of Ireland. And you know, it's just like that kind of stuff. But it's so close. It's so close to the kind of reality that it's spooky. But I think that Mike Pence is the only one who can shoot himself in the foot like that. I'm not sure that we can do that. Maybe he's buying Skittles for Trump. I don't know. It works for Kevin McCarthy, right? But yeah. Mike.
Okay. Well, just take it easy.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the call. Good talking to you. Charles in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
How you doing?
Good.
I was wanted to comment yesterday on some comments that some of the callers made.
Mm-hmm.
One young man called up and he was talking about, where are the black millionaires? I think he was from Texas. Did we call from Texas?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what he's talking about. There's tons of them. I mean, black people are like all over the economic and the running corporations, and they're, millionaires. These people today have to basically associate themselves with positive people who are upward mobile. I'm going to be honest. A lot of this hip-hop music is kind of negative, and it gets them to think. I'm not saying it's the music itself, but the environment and certain things that they create, or they live in, doesn't allow them to be upwardly mobile. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand his complaint. They're young, and he said that it's because they're entertainers and millionaires. I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, America has produced people coming from, Europe and Ellis Island to become wealthy and famous people, and their children pass on that, wealth. For instance, Grant Hill, the famous basketball player. His mother, Janet, went to school with Hillary. She was a lawyer.
Right.
And his father went to Yale, and he was a football player for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Grant is a big businessman. He owns part of the Atlanta Hawks. So I understand the negativity I felt really bad that he was talking about, the negativity. And one more thing, the first thing you talked about when you came on, you talked about the first call about Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the conservatives, they want to interpret Malcolm X as like basically get government out of our lives. Malcolm X wasn't about that. Malcolm X was about we are Americans too. And what he did was for instance, there was one integration of a school in the South, and he talked about how why from Kennedy send troops down to this particular incident. Not one law will be changed for him to intervene to help those people. So he recognized that we are Americans too. Just the negativity I hear really breaks my heart sometimes with some young black people.
Yeah. You wonder to what extent this is folks who are trapped is the wrong word, but exposed to or believing the largely white power structure media bubble that still seems to, Trump. Remember when Trump in the campaign, he said, black people, what the hell do you have to lose? You live in hellholes and you can't walk down the street without getting shot. I mean,
Trump is not really the.
No, but I think that but Trump is
issues are still going to remain. I remember Ronald Reagan during the campaign in 1980. There was a big video on it. He went to the South Bronx. He talked about what he's going to do to help the people in the South Bronx. Blah blah blah. The people came out and said, "Tell us what you're going to do specifically." He had no answers.
Right.
So black people specifically, and the whole thing with the immigration is kind of tied in with us. And I can go on, but I don't have a limited amount of time. But the whole thing about our economy, we are in worse situations as a people than we are. My father's 99. He says that there were times when he couldn't even really go into stores. And he left the South in North Carolina at age 8 and came to New Jersey like in the late 20s. Mm-hmm. And it was like such an opportunity. Although it wasn't 100% open, just opportunities he said that people are not taking advantage of today. And yes, there are pressures, there is racism, there are people, but these young people today have to transcend those negativity points of view and just go for it. You know what I mean? Because, I'm not trying to, advocate conservative thinking or even so-called liberal progressive thinking. I'm saying that the people for being here for 300 plus years, we have, after the Civil War, black people, within 10, 20 years, they own land. They had established legacy, the black colleges, the black churches, black businesses like Atlanta Life Insurance. We were under tremendous pressures, much more than we ever had today.
Right.
So we have to yes, we have problems today, But we have to transcend those things. Education is our key. The only way as black people have ever risen in our society was education.
And that's not just true.
His daughter is a graduate of Yale.
Yeah, and that's true regardless of your race, Charles. I mean, you know, it's
Yeah, right. The American story.
Yeah.
And like I said, people from other countries are coming here. Trump's comments are laughable because people are coming over here from other countries, and those immigrants are much more contributors to our society than the average native-born American because they're strivers.
Yeah.
So anyway,
in fact, I'd been thinking for some time about writing an op-ed saying we need to open our doors to. I'm not even going to try to use the president's word, Trump's obscenity. Poor countries, let's say. We need to invite more poor people in. Even. I mean, they're trying to say now, oh no, we weren't trying to trash those countries. We were just saying we don't want any more poor people coming in here. Well, it's poor people who build things. You know, wealthy people don't come to the United States. What are they going to do? You know, they've already got their money. Poor people come here. They start their own businesses. They build things. They and again, regardless of race, regardless of where you came from. My grandfather and his three brothers came to the United States from Norway in 1919 or 1917. I think it was 1917, and had nothing. They lived on the south side of Chicago. They started a little furniture making store, Hartmann Brothers, they called it. And, they were making cabinets and stuff like that. And slowly, but they never got rich, but they built the American dream. This is true of all immigrants, regardless of their race. People come to this country, and there's something about the first generation of immigrants of like, wow, we've got a chance. Let's make the most of it. And, I would love that notion to be more infectious, right, for more of us to think that way. But it's really almost like we should be encouraging not rich people to come to the United States, but poor people who are highly motivated, regardless of their race. And it's the other thing that I think a lot of Americans don't realize is that prior to the 1960s, there were functional racial quotas because the law said that we could only allow immigrants into the United States based on percentages of national origin that reflected those percentages in the American population. So if 8% of the American population was Irish, we could take 8% of people from Ireland. If 12% of the American population was from France, we could take 12% from France. I have no idea of what the numbers are. I'm just using these as, for example. And that was our immigration policy from the 1920s until the 1960s. And either Jack Kennedy or Lyndon Johnson blew that thing up and said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. It has nothing to do with the population of the United States. And that's when more people of color began to emigrate into the United States, and the browning of America began in a really, substantial fashion. And I see that as a good thing. Pat Buchanan wrote a whole book about how terrible that was. Right? This is the whole meme of the white racist right is, oh, we've got to reverse that. And this is the thing, again, the media doesn't talk about this. I think people just don't know the history. What Donald Trump is talking about doing, what Steve Miller is talking about doing, Stephen Miller, who's, the young weird guy who's, Trump's immigration whisperer, what Steve Bannon was talking about doing. Well, whether they're saying it explicitly or not, is rolling back that change in policy in 1965. And now they're trying to gussy it up by saying, well, we didn't mean, bad countries. We just meant bad individuals. So if somebody's got a PhD in Nigeria, sure, they're welcome. But that's, it's not the PhD candidates who make this country, or the PhD people with PhDs who make this country great. It is the people who come here with nothing and build something. The people who come here and I'm not even talking about become millionaires. It's the people who become the middle class, who build, who create families, who are contributors to society, who work every day, who help make this country function. We've got our priorities all screwed up, and it's being driven by race baiting on the Republican side, by this naked, overt shout out to white nationalists and white supremacists. And it's not doing this country any favors at all. In fact, it's hurting us. It's hurting us badly. It's hurting us inside this country and hugely all around the world.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
In a few minutes, plus we'll be having your calls and more of the news of the day after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Jim, Jim in Muskegon, Michigan. Hey, Jim, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Tom, first of all, thank you so much for being a little island of sanity and hope in a sea of chaos and despair.
Thank you.
I watch you every day to get my pickup, because otherwise they'd be probably crawling to a bottle for the next 3 years, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
I understand. Jim?
Tom? Yeah, Tom, I'm still here. I'm sorry. I cut you off.
No, it's all good.
I also wanted to tell you, too, Tom, that thanks again for all you do and free speech. I also wanted to know, you're up on the news big time. I don't know if you heard the latest thing that just came over, flashed on the ticker on MSNBC. The EU, in conjunction with Canada and Australia, has put a temporary immigration suspended ban on the United States for immigration to those countries, as long as the Republicans and Donald Trump have turned this country into a third world banana s-hole. So they don't want any right-wing gun-toting people without the insurance flooding into their countries.
Are you serious? I missed that story. It just didn't.
Hey, Tom, I'm sorry. I did that on a Friday fall for hook, line, and sinker, and I cleared it with your call.
Oh, so you're
person. He said Tom's got a good sense of humor.
You're punking me.
You'll laugh at that.
They should, Jim. They should.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're really and truly offended, and it's pretty clear most of them are by what Drumpf is doing. They should. Jim, thanks for the smile. I appreciate it. Good to hear from you.
You need a little laugh, Tom. It's all too depressing otherwise. So thanks so much, buddy, for what you're doing.
Yep. Good talking to you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony in Columbus, Kansas. Hey, Anthony, what's on your mind today?
How are you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
I love your show.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of comments that I'd like you to respond to, maybe.
Okay.
And the one comment that you made about immigration, I mean, if you live in Norway, why in the world would you want to come to the United States anyway, unless you just want to do something different? They have one of the best standards of living in the world.
Yep.
And the double talk that you hear from these people, it gets on my nerves to the point, he didn't mean people white from Norway. He was talking about just people from successful. No, folks, I heard what he said. That's not what he meant at all.
Yeah.
If you could follow this gentleman's racist. You can go back 50 years to his father. They've been doing this all their life.
Yeah. And also with the thing from Norway, you could say that really what Donald Trump was saying is he only wants to take people in who are coming from democratic socialist countries.
Yeah.
I mean, let that one sink in for a minute. Because we know there was I think it was the TED Hour on NPR over the weekend. I was listening as I was driving around, and they were talking about how poverty. They looked at a group of sugarcane workers who get paid with the harvest, and so they live in poverty for half a year, and then they're wealthy for half a year. Not wealthy, but they got money. And what they found was when they did IQ tests on these people during the poverty period, their IQs were 14 points lower than when they had money. Exact same people in the exact same year. So democratic socialism, which makes everybody wealthier except the billionaires, actually makes people smarter. We should think about that. Anthony, thanks for the call. We'll be back. Do we have Free Speech TV on?
Yeah, we're on.
Luke, where is he? Oh, there he is. I'm sorry. Luke, you were buried in the middle of the board. Luke, let's check in with Free Speech TV, excuse me, with Talk Media News Service and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. Luke Vargas on the line with us from New York. Hey, Luke.
Hey, Tom. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. So what's on the news today? What's on your list? I don't have a copy. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'll walk you through it. So the big thing I'm watching today is a summit that is being convened jointly by the United States and Canada in Vancouver today. It's a one-day summit bringing together 20 countries to talk about ways to contain North Korea. And this seemed like a kind of an obvious thing to host when it was scheduled in November. That's right after one of the North Korean intercontinental ballistic missile tests, and the U.S. was pretty much at the peak of its military rhetoric toward North Korea. And so we put this thing on the calendar expecting to really want to twist the screws this week. And there have been reports that U.S. diplomats are using this meeting to ask about asking other countries to start intercepting North Korean ships on the high seas. But I think this comes at a possibly destabilizing time for this coalition of states, because China and Russia said they don't want any part of this. They think the meeting has too much of a military focus, and they're very concerned that that request I just mentioned from the U.S. to start intercepting these North Korean shipments goes beyond what they've agreed to at UN Security Council meetings and on these UN Security Council sanctions. In fact, that provision encouraging countries to just sort of basically intercept all of these North Korean boats and then just inspect the cargo and then let them go if they're fine, but haul the boats into port if they're holding sanctioned goods, was specifically taken out by China and Russia because they didn't disagree with it. So they're saying this is not good. It's breaking the unity of the coalition, that this meeting should have been scrapped, or at least the U.S. shouldn't have gone with people like Jim Mattis if you're trying to, give hope to this diplomatic opening. Instead, there's a big military message coming out of the meeting today.
I'm getting the sense that Jim Mattis, and he is the president's national security advisor. What's his title now?
Defense.
He's the defense secretary?
I don't think I'm that confused, am I?
No, I'm that confused, Luke. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Because Mattis is like, he's hanging around the White House all the time talking to Trump, and that traditionally, the defense secretary is over at the Pentagon. But so I thought maybe he had, but whatever. Right? They've been playing musical chairs at the White House.
Sure.
But is Mattis like a warmonger, for lack of a better word? I mean, does he want to have a war with North Korea? He's the guy who was pushing the bloody nose theory, right? Give Kim a bloody nose.
He's also advocating for an increased naval presence around North Korea, which, again, there are lots of ways you could describe that. But China is looking at this and saying, okay, we told you we're pointedly not in favor of just sort of open season on all these North Korean vessels, and yet the U.S. said, fine, we won't put that in the UN Security Council resolutions, but we're pushing it to a smaller group of allies on the side, and we are considering, if you take Mattis's comments this week seriously, just putting more and smaller naval boats out in those waters anyways, and then kind of just see what happens. That, of course, is, as sort of you're talking about, increases the risk of some sort of accident, which could open up a military engagement. But, again, this meeting made a lot of sense, I think, when it was put on the calendar in November, but it comes at a weird time where, at least people are paying lip service to this prospect of a diplomatic opening with North Korea, and yet the U.S. is holding a meeting that focuses on an entirely different suite of options that sort of run contrary to what's in vogue right now, at least.
Well, maybe the incident in Hawaii will have sensitized Americans enough that we won't be supportive of this kind of craziness. But this really should be coming out of the UN, not the U.S., it seems to me. Anyhow, what else is on your list, Luke?
I'll say very briefly, the U.S., you might have covered this yesterday, but over the weekend, in a kind of a quiet fashion, the U.S. released the fact that it's going to be arming a 30,000-person brigade of Kurdish troops in eastern Syria that is going to outlast the United States there and really probably keep us there in some capacity for years. It's going to be called the Syrian Border Security Force. Turkey and the Syrian government, of course, are furious about this. Turkey says these Kurds are basically going to be a terror force that is going to go after Turkish territory at some point.
Luke, forgive the interruption. Are these Iraqi Kurds, or are they
They're going to be
Turkish
Syrian Kurds?
Syrian Kurds.
Syrian Kurds.
Interesting.
Predominantly. They say these forces will represent the populations in each area. And
so, but they would have had to have either fled Syria to work with us and be trained by us, or have we seized part of Syria where they are? I mean, I don't know the geography of that area.
We have worked with the Syrian Democratic Forces to seize these parts of Syria, and that's where we currently have 230 American troops training this brigade. But anyways, this is, if you wanted to get a beginning of a glimpse of what the sort of long-term U.S. engagement in Syria is going to look like, here's your answer: a 30,000-strong force that is going to probably have U.S. trainers and operatives as a part of it for some time to come.
This sounds to me just like the early 1960s when we started arming the South Vietnamese.
The Syrian government, which I don't agree with very often, put out a pretty sensible statement saying you're a foreign country creating an armed military within our territories and strictly violating international law and the country's sovereignty, which seems like it'd be hard to disagree with that.
Yeah, amen. Okay, Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Tom.
Good talking with you. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A lot of news of what's going on today and things that you and I can do something about, we can participate in, we can get active about. Steve Bannon is testifying before one of the intelligence committees. I believe it's the House Intelligence Committee right now, but it's behind closed doors. But he just got subpoenaed by Bob Mueller's investigation, so we'll see where that goes. Might not have been the smartest thing in the world for Donald Trump to start calling him Sloppy Steve. But, who knows? But some of the other stuff that I think is really consequential. You'll recall former Verizon lawyer, lobbyist, whatever he was, Ajit Pai, the guy who was on the FCC that Donald Trump made chair of the FCC, changed the FCC's classification of the Internet as under Title II of the Telecommunications Act, which meant that it was considered a public utility, basically, a carrier, a common carrier. In other words, the people delivering the Internet to you can't mess with it. Just like your phone company can't listen in on your phone conversations or inject its own opinions into your phone conversations. Same thing with the Internet. That's how it used to be. And Ajit Pai blew that up a few weeks ago. But there's this piece of legislation that was passed, I believe, back during the Clinton time, but it might have been even before that, called the Congressional Review Act. And it was something Republicans were all, hot about, that allowed Congress to overturn policy directives that were made by executive branch agencies. So, the way our government is organized, we have these, three branches of government. You've got, the first branch is the legislative, House and Senate. The second is the executive, the president. And the third is the judicial, the Supreme Court and all the other courts. And in the executive branch, while Congress, the first branch, makes the laws, they don't execute the laws. They don't carry them out. They don't run the agencies that do what they said needs to be done. So if Congress says, hey, we need an environmental protection agency so that the Cuyahoga River doesn't catch on fire and so, hundreds of thousands of people don't die every year from, or tens of thousands that don't die every year from air pollution, they create the agency, they fund the agency, but then they hand it off to the president, to the executive branch, and the executive branch then, creates the agency, appoints the leaders of it, and does all that work. And so the EPA and all these other agencies are under the president, is essentially they're Article II branches of government. So the FCC falls into that category. The Federal Communications Commission is it's an Article II agency. It's part of the executive branch of government. Even though it was authorized, it was brought into existence back in the 1920s by an act of Congress, the Article I branch of government. So what the Congressional Review Act says is that if in the course of carrying out the wishes of Congress, the executive branch does something that Congress disagrees with, Congress can undo it. Very straightforward. Right? If the FCC says we're going to blow up net neutrality. And the FCC was given the authority to do that, of course, by Congress. But if Congress doesn't like that, they can simply say no. It's called a motion of disapproval. And so that motion of disapproval for blowing up net neutrality. Now, this has to happen in both the House and the Senate, which is the unfortunate part, because the Republicans control the House and they're a lot more right-wing than the Republicans in the Senate. But if the House and the Senate both vote, just a simple majority, it takes 51 votes in the Senate and 219, I think it is, 218 in the House. If both those bodies say we're going to reverse what Ajit Pai did, it's reversed. End of discussion. Net neutrality is back. So, 2 tweets here that just went out. I just retweeted Kirsten Gillibrand's tweet, and I see Brian Schatz has one. In fact, I think I'll retweet that as we speak. There it goes. So Kirsten Gillibrand tweeted just a few minutes ago, some great news. We need just one more vote, just one more senator to have enough votes to reverse the Trump administration's net neutrality repeal. Keeping our internet free and open to everyone could not be more important. Contact your senators today! ! Good on you, Kirsten Gillibrand. And then Brian Schatz, another Democratic member of the Senate, he says, so it's official. Every single Senate Democrat is going to vote for the Congressional Review Act for net neutrality, the CRA it's called, for net neutrality. With Senator Collins, Susan Collins, the Republican from Maine, we are at 50. So, and then he says, can you guys help us find one more Republican vote so we can win this thing? So if you are represented by a Republican in the United States Senate, and I think, once the Senate passes this, it's going to be much more difficult for the House to ignore it. If you are represented by a Republican senator, please consider calling that Republican senator's office right now and saying, please vote to bring back net neutrality. Vote for the Congressional Review Act, or the CRA. Just say, vote for the resolution of disapproval, or it's just, you don't even have to know all the fancy language. Just say, vote to bring back net neutrality. They'll know what you're talking about. And they're keeping score. They're absolutely keeping score. And, Congressman Mark Pocan on this program last week was talking about how when this was happening, when Ajit Pai was debating whether or not to blow up net neutrality, that Congressman Pocan's office had gotten over 9,000 messages about net neutrality. And not one of them said blow up net neutrality. 100% were in favor of net neutrality. So I'm guessing Republican senators are getting that same kind of feedback, and you can contribute to it. So if you live in a state where you have 1 or 2 Republican senators, call them. Call them now. If you're on the internet, you can go to callcongress.org, which is it's a page on my website that redirects it to it. But it's got a list of 800 numbers you can use to call Congress, plus the regular phone number for Congress. And just, call Congress and say, hey, bring back net neutrality. We want this to happen. Here's another one. And now, when you call your members of Congress, you don't want to go through a laundry list. You don't say, I'm calling with 5 things, because they will take basically one thing. So you have to make like 5 calls if you've got 5 things. So make one call about net neutrality. And then, later on today or maybe tomorrow, you might want to call and also point out, and I mentioned this much earlier in the program, but this from Josh Nelson over at Credo Action. It's an email that went out to people who are on their list. It says, stop the Republicans' backdoor attack on Social Security. And they're presenting a petition to Congress. And the petition says, over the last decade, Congress has underfunded the Social Security Administration by billions of dollars. And then they talk about, the proposal that's before Congress right now. And they say, fully fund the Social Security Administration, protect and expand Social Security for current and future generations. That's the petition. The letter says, in the new federal budget that is coming up for a vote in the next few days, Senate Republicans have proposed a $492 million cut to the Social Security Administration. And by the way, why are we not hearing a word about this in the media? Anyhow, Josh Nelson at Credo Action says, if this proposal is signed into law, it'll lead to longer wait times at Social Security offices, longer hold times when people call Social Security, and unnecessary delays in accessing retirement, survivor, and disability claims. So if you have any concern about the future of Social Security, that's another one. And then, finally, this also from Credo Action. Tell Democrats, commit to repeal and replace the Trump tax scam. This is the thing we want to tell our Democratic members of Congress is, please, you know, if you're up for a re-election, and all of them in the House are, a third of them are in the Senate, please commit that if the Democrats take back the House and Senate, they're going to repeal the GOP tax scam.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with your calls and more of the news of the day after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's see here. James in Wichita, Kansas. Hey, James, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Hey, no problem. The guy who called in earlier from New Jersey, who had the 91-year-old father, he's telling me there's tons of these black millionaires.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the numbers just don't support that. And again, you can go in there, please just Google how many black millionaires are in America.
Yeah, well, there's a simple statistic that really reveals this, and my numbers are a couple years old, James, so the numbers are probably quite a little bit different now, but probably not a lot different. But 2-3 years ago, the last time we did a show on this, the wealth of the average white family in the United States was around $85,000. Represented by home and savings accounts and everything, the actual wealth. The wealth of the average black family in America, and of course, when you say average, that includes the millionaires and billionaires. The wealth of the average black family in the United States was around $5,000. And if you were...
There you go. Thank you very much. That point has been proven. Tell them to go to Newsmax today. There's a great article that says black millionaires hardly exist in America. It's proven. Those are facts. These are numbers.
Well, Newsmax is a right-wing website that has a big interest in, making...
Go to inequality.org. Inequality.org is the same thing. It'll tell you the same thing.
Yeah, no, I'm not disputing it. I'm not disputing it at all, James. I'm agreeing with you.
And that's what I'm trying to tell him. All that stuff about pick yourself up and do this. Again, just take the one instance I said. He's a millionaire and he's a master electrician. What I'm trying to tell you, Chris Rock has a joke all the time. It's Chris Rock, Mary J. Blige, and Eddie Murphy all live in the same neighborhood. And right across the street from them is a dentist. Not a dentist who made anything. He's just a dentist. And he lives in a neighborhood with some of the biggest entertainers out there. And he goes to work every day and comes home. All those other people got to go out there and fly across the country to make their money. This guy just goes into work, comes home.
Yeah.
Doesn't anybody understand that?
I think most people do, James, and I think that there's I think the earlier caller's objection to your comment about this was like, does this mean we throw our hands up in the air? Like that? No. There are large parts. I used to live in Atlanta. There's a large chunk of Atlanta that's a very there are wealthy black suburbs in Atlanta. There are large middle class black areas in Atlanta. It's real, and a lot of white people have no clue about this. The media doesn't seem to report it, and obviously it's not just Atlanta. I'm just saying that's where I used to live, but it's almost like the right wing loves telling this story about black failure, and I absolutely understand that some people want to push back and say, no, wait a minute, we're not failures.
No, I'm not saying failures at all. All I'm stating is the fact that he's talking about there's tons of millionaires, and like I said again, we don't have the black guy of Facebook. We don't have the black guy of Apple. We don't have that. And again, if you look at a millionaire list from us, it's going to be Oprah, Jordan, Bill Cosby, people like that. But if you look at a white billionaire list, it's going to be people who made Google or who made Amazon and all those kind of people. It's not going to be an entertainment for white people are way down the list.
Yeah, and this is all the result of 400 years of various forms of structural racism, and I get it. James, thank you for the call. It's an interesting conversation. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and James in Lake Worth, Florida. Hey, James, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
I just was calling about because you always make this. You bring up how they like to defund the staffing at Social Security in order that way they collect less.
Well, no, it's so that people will have a bad experience when they try to interact with the Social Security Administration, and so we'll all be softened up when they come along and say, "Wouldn't you like something as efficient as Wells Fargo to run your Social Security?"
Right. So what I'm thinking is, then how is by adding this work requirement and having to add more staff, which is going to cost more just for salary wise, and then just in order to save money by kicking people off the rolls. This is just something, I don't know if anyone had brought this up yet, but to me it seems almost like the other side of the same coin.
In a way, the thing that you have to keep in mind, James, is that in the first 3 years of the Medicare or Medicaid expansion, the government picked up, I think it might have been 98%, but I believe it was 100% of the cost. So it didn't cost the states a penny. We're beyond those 3 years now, I'm pretty sure. And so now, as I recall, it is after that 3 years going forward into infinity, the federal government pays 80%, so the states pay only 20%. So, and when you look at the benefit to a state of having a healthy population, they actually make a profit. It's actually beneficial to states, and you can see this in all the blue states that have expanded Medicaid. It's actually beneficial to the states and doesn't cost them any money to expand Medicaid. But this is not about saving money. This is about ideology. The billionaires who own the Republican Party really and truly believe that working people should be, quote, incentivized to make enough money to buy their own health care, that socialism is a bad thing. Now, they want their own socialism. They want their patent laws and their copyright laws and their trademark laws and their tax subsidies, and they want, cities and states to fight with each other over who could throw the biggest tax breaks at them when they move or open their factories and all that kind of stuff. But that's what it really is. It's they like welfare for the rich and welfare for corporations, and Medicaid arguably isn't even welfare. It's health insurance, but no health insurance for you and me, James. That's what they're saying.
Right.
It's ideology.
But they outwardly proclaim that it's a financial issue.
You're right.
That's kind of what gets me, and people fall for it.
Yep.
And no one even thinks, without even taking into the account the way they like to hurt the poor. Just by taking on their word alone, saying, "Oh, it's a money savings." They were going to redefine Medicaid. Is that how you said it earlier today? The Trump administration wants to.
It wasn't redefine. It was re-something. Yeah, it's like reboot or whatever, reinvent.
Taking it on what they're proclaiming the reasons are. Even that reason even seems to be horse manure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it was refine, but that's absolutely right. And these are programs just like for example, we learned from the experience of the GI Bill that if you give people free college, for every dollar we spent sending people to college, after World War II on the GI Bill, we made $7 in additional tax revenue we wouldn't have made, we being the country. Not to mention all the benefits of having an educated workforce. It's similar to having a healthy workforce. It's similar to having a healthy populace. It's similar to catching diseases before they become, morbid, before they're out of control. It is just common sense, James, but the Republican Party doesn't give a rat's ass about common sense or science. This stuff can all be proved scientifically, mathematically, but just like with global warming, no interest in science. James, I got to move along, but thank you for the call.
Yes, thank you very much for talking to me today.
Sure, very well said. Thank you, Stephen in Beaver, Utah. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind today?
Well, yes, I can tell you a fast way to fix America would be just pull your money out of the bank accounts until Congress gets off their butts and listen and don't put it back in.
Well, I think just a wise survival skill right now is to take your money out of bank accounts and put it into savings loans, credit unions. Credit unions are extraordinary. They're local nonprofits.
You realize I wouldn't put it there either. They're going to be last to fill.
I think not. Unless there's just a huge systemic breakdown. But there is an FDI. There's the equivalent of the FDIC for credit unions. Sorry, Sean. So your savings are protected. And credit, when you put money in a credit union, you're essentially buying shares in the credit union. The credit union, all the people who run it, the people who make the decisions, they're members of the credit union. You could work your way up in a credit union. You could become the president of the credit union. I mean, there's tremendous opportunities and options there. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Stephen, thank you for the call. Very well said. Carl in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Carl, what's up?
Hey, Tom. First of all, let me add two things quickly. First thing is this. You don't know any of these men that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, but I just noticed that I'm going to hit a break here in about 3 seconds. Carl, I'm going to put you on hold, and I'll pick you up on the other side of the break, okay?
Cool. No problem.
Thank you very much. We'll be right back with Carl and Gerald and William and John and Patty and everybody. Stick around. More of your calls and the news of the day. Plus, this is from Newsweek. Donald Trump didn't know that there were white people on welfare? Really? I'll tell you about this after the break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Along, of course, with your calls. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Food stamps. Donald Trump was apparently, I'm reading from Newsweek. President Donald Trump was apparently unaware that not all, in fact, the vast majority of welfare beneficiaries are not black. In the spring of 2017, the newly elected president met with members of the Congressional Black Caucus. During that meeting, one of the members added to Trump that welfare reform would be detrimental to her constituents, adding, not all of whom are black. The president was incredulous. Really? Then what are they? Statistically speaking, writes Newsweek, they were probably white. In fact, whites are the biggest beneficiaries. Here's how it breaks out. Over 40% of SNAP recipients are white, 25.7% are black, 10.3% Hispanic, 2.1% Asian, 1.2% Native American, which is kind of, not quite, but kind of the distribution of people in our population. It's remarkable. Carl in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Carl. My apologies for so rudely interrupting you 5 minutes ago.
No, that's how radio works.
Yep.
Yep, I understand. But let me. I have two things I want to speak of, and they all relate to it. So let me get to it. You don't know these gentlemen. One of them named is George Hill the First, and one named George Hill the Second. The George Hill the Second was my great grandfather. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough, and I mean fortunate, to had known my great-grandfather for 26 years. He didn't die until I was 26 years old.
Wow.
So I got just the treasure trove of history and knowing my history from sitting at his side and talking to him well into my adulthood. Mm-hmm. And then the first point is it always amazes me how European immigrants, second or third generation European immigrants in America, always think themselves to be more American than anybody else.
Right.
I mean, if you run down the tree, Donald Trump and Vic Santorum, those guys is like second generation American or first generation American in some cases. They think themselves to be more American than anybody. That frustrates me to no end, because I know George Hill the First and George Hill the Second. I know that generation to go back centuries in this country. But they'll look at my black ass and say, I'm more American than you. And I've never gotten that. That's number one. And number two...
Before you move on, Carl, may I react to that?
Sure, go ahead.
I believe that the reason why they say that, and they probably wouldn't say it in exactly the words you were saying, but, functionally everything they say and do belies that. It suggests that that's what they're saying, what they're thinking. It's coming out of this mythology that people like Newt Gingrich and others have promoted over the years, that America is, quote, a white nation, end quote. And just like America is, quote, a Christian nation, end quote. And, it's just not true. I mean, the whole American idea And yeah, it was flawed, and we had slavery and all that kind of stuff. But the idea was grounded in the Enlightenment, which was the idea that people can govern themselves, and that Lindsey Graham said it to Donald Trump. He said, America is not a race, it's an idea. And so, it's all it is just their ignorance and their racism. Excuse me, Carl.
I mean, I have always noticed that, and I'll look at it with a smirk on my face, knowing who my great-grandfather, my great-great-great-great-grandfathers, who they were and where they come from, right here in America.
Right.
And then the other thing I wanted to speak on is this. You cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm talking to Democrats and liberals and progressives right now. What we did in the last election was an abomination. When you try and get the perfect instead of the good, you get a racist, you get a narcissist, you get this demonic monster in the White House, you get these evil evangelical hypocrites following him, you get these fake family values, these fake fiscal conservatives following behind him. Like a guy sweeping up the dung from an elephant in a parade. This is what you get, and we cannot ever let this happen to us again. I'll say this: I don't care what anybody thinks. After South Carolina, after Nevada, it should have been over, done, settled. But no. We played this game with ourselves.
Talking about guns.
And this is what we got. This right here, this is the reason why you should never let the good be the enemy, the perfect be the enemy of the good, because I guarantee you we wouldn't have this mess that we have upon our hands. And we're going to have to deal with this. You can have wishful thinking all you want, but this guy's going to be around for another 3 years. We can have all the impeachments, this, impeachment, that. He's going to be there unless he just does some, because his base is with him no matter what, and they're like his little race is 35% of the country is around him. They're like a cloak around him, and as long as he spit out racist, nasty things, he will have his base. Make no mistake about it. He knew that the S-hole comments, he knew those were going to get out, and the reason why he did that, because his right-wing base was killing him for even suggesting giving Dreamers any type of break during the meeting on Monday. Just as the last time he did it, when he had Chuck and Nancy in his office, they killed him. And what did he do? He went down to Alabama and called NFL players, mostly black sons of bitches, just to placate his racist base. So that's what they are. This is where we are. We should never, ever do what we did in 2016 to ourselves again. Our country deserves better.
I agree with you, Carl. And to that point, I very rarely delete a tweet, but last night there was an article in the New York Times about how 6, as I recall, Democratic senators are working with Republicans to loosen regulations on banking, which seems to me crazy. I mean, Elizabeth Warren is out saying, please don't, this will be a disaster, it'll cause problems, et cetera, et cetera. And, but, they're doing it. And of course, they're doing it, in my opinion, these Democrats who are doing that are doing it because they're taking money from the big banks. And so I retweeted that New York Times story with this really snarky thing about, you might want to call your Democratic senators and let them know what you think, although they probably won't listen to you unless you enclose a $100,000 check. And this morning, I'd been thinking about it all night. In fact, I woke up last night thinking about it. I really shouldn't have tweeted that. And so this morning, about an hour before I went on the air, I went in and I deleted that tweet because it's circular firing squad. And I've talked for years about
we can't afford them.
Exactly.
We can't afford that. Say one thing about the treasonous Republican Party. January the 20th, 2009. Representatives from the House and representatives from the Senate had 2 different meetings, and I swear to God, for the life of me, I don't understand why this isn't being investigated more vigorously than it should have. I guess Obama just had too much class to do so, but they pretty much had a coup on our government. they said they wasn't going to, literally had two different meetings from representatives from the Senate and the House saying that they wasn't going to let anything pass by, anything get by. They're going to muddy up everything, even if it's in their self-interest, because they can't allow us to have a win, AI, the country, because the country would think that this guy is doing something competent in the White House. So we must have that type of resolve. I mean, really, no more of this, no, we can't do that. No, we must have that type of resolve, the same resolve that they had in the Senate and the House, blocking everything.
I agree.
And
we need solidarity. We need solidarity. I mean, I may not agree with Joe Manchin on everything. He was one of the guys, who was going to water down the banking regulations. But he's a Democrat, and that means that he is going to, if we can have a Democratic majority, everything changes. And Manchin, McCaskill, whatever. Yeah, no, it's like, and they all understand, even if they're taking money from the banks, they all understand that it's a broken and corrupt system. And they are the people who will have the ability to change it, hopefully, someday. So, anyhow, Carl, I gotta move along. But good talking with you. Thank you. Gerald in Simi Valley, California. Hey, Gerald, what's on your mind?
I just wanted to comment on the racial slur that supposedly Trump said. But in 2016, in an interview with U.S. Magazine, President Obama called Libya a shit show.
Oh, geez. Gerald, I'm sorry. We cannot, and I should have X'd him out, we cannot use that kind of language on the air. I realize, if it did not get out, right, Sean? You dumped it? Okay. But if anybody heard that, my sincere apologies. We can't. I realize the president talks like this. And I realize that some of the cable media uses this, but they are not on over-the-air radio stations, and we just can't do it. So, anyhow, enough of that. I got 30 seconds here. I just wanted to, I didn't finish my whole rant earlier about SNAP recipients, food stamp recipients, and I was going through that list. Trump is now saying his top priority is, quote, welfare reform. Top priority for this year. Now, you know what that means. And his administration, this from Newsweek again, his administration and congressional Republicans are looking to overhaul federal safety net programs, right? Like SNAP, Medicaid, and housing benefits. News of Trump's welfare comments arrived as he's dealing with the backlash of reportedly calling African countries, and there's that word I can't say on the air. Anyhow, that's what's going on. Chris Kobach, meanwhile, is prosecuting an old white guy for voter fraud, because that's all he could find. He's desperate. An old white Republican for voter fraud. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. John in Crawfordville, Florida. Hey, John, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Hi, Tom. Yeah, it's an honor to be speaking with you again. I wanted to make a comment to try to helpfully assure some of the public out there about nuclear weapons and how they might be used or not used by sharing some of the information that I get by my connections to my father, who was in the Air Force. Through the Air Force magazine, their latest issue, quote from John Hayton, who is the head of the U.S. Strategic Command. Now, that's the air wing of our nuclear defense forces. And this was at a Halifax International Security Forum on November 18th. Quote, some people think we're stupid. We're not stupid people. We think about the nuclear weapons a lot. If you execute an unlawful order, you will go to jail. It applies to nuclear weapons. I provide advice to the president. He will tell me what to do, and if it's illegal, guess what? It's not going to happen. I'm going to say to the president, Mr. President, it is illegal. And guess what he's going to do? He's going to say what would be legal. And we'll come up with options and a mix of capabilities to respond to whatever the situation is. And that's how it works. So this is a direct quote from the Air Force general who is in command of the nuclear weapons wings through the Air Force.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will assuage the public, who are freaking out about.
I am not comforted by that, John. And the reason why I'm not comforted by that is I remember the Saturday Night Massacre in 1970, whatever it was, in the Nixon years, where he went to his attorney general, or maybe it was the number two, the assistant AG, Archibald Cox, and said, fire the special prosecutor, stop the Watergate investigation. And Cox said no, and so he fired him. And then the number two guy, and I'm not remembering all the names now, it's so long ago, but then the number two guy came along, and I don't remember if he fired the number two guy or the number two guy did what the details of it were, but basically Trump, in my opinion, what Trump would do is if he went to Mattis or anybody, although Mattis seems to be, Mad Dog Mattis. I mean, it's just scary. Correct. But if he went to a general or to whoever is in charge of facilitating the launching of nuclear weapons and said do it, and they said no, he would say you're fired. He wouldn't say what's illegal.
True, but at least I'm just trying to give a little bit of hope to the people that, our upper command structure in the military does understand that there are serious repercussions in their careers for executing illegal orders. Now, I'm not saying that bad things aren't being done by our military or that they are fully under, civilian command the way they should be. Right. But it's just, at least it's a ray of hope that there are at least some.
It's a ray of hope, but I think the real solution to this problem is to vote the bums out of office. I mean,
I agree 100%.
We need to move along on that. John, I got to go. I'm hitting a break here, but thank you for the call and thanks for the story. It's a good story. Hopefully the people in our military will take the honorable course if Donald Trump decides to start World War III. I wouldn't bet money on it, but hopefully it'll happen. We'll be back. Welcome back. William, you're going to have to pronounce your city there in Arizona. What is it?
Hold on a second. I am in Ogden, I think, but maybe not.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Sure. Yeah, what's on your mind?
I'm from Sunrise Beach, but I travel. I deliver fifth-wheelers and trailers around the country, so I'm all over.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Okay, so the Canadian summit thing where they said the two countries, us and Canada, are getting together how to contain North Korea.
Right.
Is there enough room in the studio for someone from every country in the world to get together that has rational minds and come up with an idea how to contain the United States? Because we're out of control.
Yeah.
We are. I don't understand much of the rhetoric or logic or whatever they use or don't use anymore. They just want their hands in too much war and too much whatever. And I totally get your frustration with your comment with some of the Democratic senators wanting to loosen more banking regulation.
Yeah.
You're human, Tom, and you let that out, caught it, you brought it, you deleted it. But, again, that's why I like listening to your program. That was a human reaction. Enough's enough.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, I was rather pissed off when I read that piece in the New York Times, but then I thought, these are the people who will, these Democratic votes are going to do a lot of good things, and these are also the people who would love to stop taking money from the banks if they could overturn that Supreme Court decision, and that's not going to happen until Democrats have 60 seats in the Senate. That's what it's going to take.
Right, and if we get enough progressives, you could see how it works through that. Some of those on the board or Democrats or someone, they might just look and go, okay, we got a chance now, let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's just get it done. And get the money out is definitely the first thing.
Yeah, but the thing on North Korea, number one, I'm very concerned about this, and Luke rather alarmed me on that. Number two, I think the false alarm in Hawaii, certainly the Hawaiians understand the stakes in a way that the rest of us don't. And I would hope that the rest of us would get something from this. And number three, the thing that nobody is discussing is that we have been dropping bombs on other people's countries ever since George W. Bush started 2 illegal wars. And those people are experiencing what the people in Hawaii experienced for 38 minutes. They're experiencing it 24/7, 365, and have been for 15 years.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of Americans realize the drone strikes and how much bombing is actually. Didn't we at one time run out of bombs?
I don't know if we ran out, but we have sure...
Or our stockpile got depleted?
Yeah, we have sure dropped an awful lot. I mean, we've dropped more ordnance in the Middle East than we did in World War II. It's amazing. And in World War II, we didn't have depleted uranium. I mean, we laid waste Iraq and Afghanistan with depleted uranium. So now they're having an explosion of serious birth defects as a consequence of this. So it's like we need to start taking this stuff seriously and stop just nattering around the margins.
I called in last week, and I was encouraged by North Korea using the hotline or whatever, and then doing this Olympic thing and whatever.
Yeah.
And you made a point that Donald Trump's insanity may have caused some of that. They're just going to try and work something out themselves.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, we'll see.
But then you have the Trump wild card. What will he do to disrupt that?
That's right. And this is why we can't make this kind of mistake again in an election. William, thanks for the call. Well said. Susie in Eureka, Montana. Hey, Susie, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Great. Well, let me be little Susie Sunshine for a minute. I thought we might go back to the net neutrality topic. I've called both my senators. I have a Democrat and a Republican. And so I suggested to the Republicans' office they do a lot of working across the aisle. Back, 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
That was commonplace.
Yeah.
People.
Well, 40 to 50 years ago, you didn't have.
Great at it.
40 to 50 years ago, you didn't have right-wing billionaires funding basically patsies. Patsies is the wrong word. Shills for political office. I mean, you've got now a bunch of people in the Republican Party whose single loyalty is to the morbidly rich.
Right, but I have an idea to start working towards a direction across the aisle.
Okay.
And I suggested it to the Democrats' office.
Okay.
And they like that.
You have 40 seconds. What is it?
It's take a Republican to lunch week.
You mean like as in a friend or a neighbor?
As in a senator.
Oh. But
every Democrat.
But if you're not writing six-figure checks, they're not going to go with you.
2 Republicans to lunch of the senators.
Yeah, but
and the representatives are not exempt.
Yeah. I like your idea, Susie. I like the sentiment of it. Citizen lobbyists, Progressive Democrats of America was founded on that. The idea of inside-outside politics. Let's lobby and let's also be an outside force. But the sad fact is Republicans are not going to want to go to lunch with you unless you write a $100,000 check to them. That's what it's going to take, unfortunately.
Even if you're a senator.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The Democratic senators should take Republican senators to lunch.
Democratic senators all take a Republican or 2 to lunch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, wouldn't that be nice?
Same thing in the House of Representatives.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? Susie, you are a ray of sunshine. Thank you. Thanks for the call. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget democracy. It doesn't just spring magically out of nothing. You got to work to build a democracy, to keep a democracy. It's not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.